Wait a minute, why did it get so quiet all of a sudden? I mean, the hubbub in this room is an indication of the energy and the interest in being here. It was delightful, and all of a sudden you just shut down. Well, let's presume that you shut down for a reason. I'm Magan Keita. I'm the Vice Chair of the Board of Trustees of the College Board, and I truly and sincerely want to welcome all of you here to this town hall, and I want to applaud each and every one of you for your extraordinary work on behalf of the students of the United States of America. Thank you very much. Now, you're not here to hear me. It's clear. And so, without belaboring the point, I simply want you to understand that David is here with us after an extreme amount of effort and energy on behalf of a search committee that traveled literally the breadth and the length of this country in order to find the best candidate to in fact serve as the president of the College Board. David has lots of strengths, lots of skills, a superb intellect. But the thing that has impressed me most about David is the thing that my great niece told me when she texts me. Yes, she texts me, my great niece. In fact, I believe I'm her favorite uncle because she texts me. But she texts me, and I told her, I said, I can't text you right now because I'm in the middle of selecting the president for the College Board. And she texts back and she said, just make sure that you choose someone who has emotional intelligence. I had to look it up. But then I found out that not only do we have an intellect, a person of huge energetic proportions, a visionary, a person who is able and capable of coming into a room of diverse people and getting them to unite around a vision. But we also, as my niece indicated, have a person with superb emotional intelligence. So without further ado, I want you to greet David Coleman, the next president of the board, of the chair of the College Board.
What Magan was kind enough not to share with you were the many weaknesses overlooked in my selection as the president of the College Board, including my penchant for saying sometimes unnecessarily bold and controversial statements, a tendency towards a dangerous level of candor and bluntness. So I want you to know that my fellow trustees who are here, as well as the staff of the College Board, is in a mighty state of terror as they are watching these words unfold before you as to what I may or may not say. And this will likely be a state that shall be sustained over the next years of my leadership of the College Board. It's interesting because this is my first public meeting as president of the College Board. And I considered, and the team considered it most appropriate, that this is a teacher town hall. That the voice of teachers is the most important voice. And I say that knowing I'm making choices. The most important voice in shaping the daily life and the daily work of education in this country. And I will say first and foremost to you, you will find a hallmark of my leadership of the College Board, a constant attention to the voice of teachers and to their remarkable role in transforming and affecting the lives of the students in their care. As one indication of that power, I just want to pause before talking about anything about myself or my own work or the College Board itself to talk about a remarkable result that Trevor shared about the growth in AP scores that we've seen. We've seen a historic result this year, a result in which we have both expanded radically the diversity and breadth of students taking AP, and at the same time, demonstrably and clearly raised achievement. I want to pause and celebrate the educators in this room, Herb Ellish, who's here, Trevor, and the leadership of the College Board through those years working on this program, all of you who have contributed to that remarkable fact to at the same time expand access, diversity, and excellence. There is nothing better than equity and excellence achieved, and for that, I pause to congratulate you. And it goes without saying that that was under the leadership of Gaston Caperton for the past 13 years. So I just wanted to pause to signal my remarkable respect for the institution he has led and built and the relationships he's already built with you. It is a tremendous honor to build on good work. So for Gaston. So I want to return now to a discussion of teachers and teaching, if that's okay with you, because that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. I don't want to talk about policy. I want to talk about the daily life of teaching. I'm going to dare to do that. That could get me into a lot of trouble, so let's walk together. I really aim to open up some ideas with you. I want to open up a conversation. So what I'm going to do is make some brief remarks, and then hopefully we'll have a conversation. I'm really interested in discussing with you today, what kind of ideas do you think would happen? What would happen in the relationship the College Board has to teachers and educators throughout this country? And when I focus on teachers, of course I mean to include school leaders and superintendents and the people involved in the education of children, but most of all, frankly, the teachers who teach them every day. I want to explore with you what are the best, boldest ideas of how to strengthen the teacher in the everyday classroom in their daily work and hence help kids achieve most. So that's my question. And so consider my remarks a kind of poking around that question, and then I'm going to open it up to questions relatively soon. I expect after about 15 minutes I'd like to hear from you. So you might begin to wonder in your minds, gosh, what would be really exciting ways to engage teachers and help their work? Because that's kind of my question to you. I didn't know what Megan would say when he introduced me, which led to a terror all my own. You did a great job, Megan. You were remarkably restrained. But when he talked about searching the country for such a figure, it reminded me of a very interesting moment. Forgive me for being a bit academic here, but it's in one of the dialogues of Plato. It's actually the Phaedo, which is the dialogue in which Socrates actually dies. This is the dialogue in which he takes the hemlock. So this is a discussion in his prison cell, or nearby it. And he's talking to his finest students. In a remarkable moment that we'll get back to later, the one great student who is not there is who's not in the dialogue of the Phaedo, despite being perhaps his most famous student? Plato. It says, in 2 words in Greek, it says Plato was sick. So Plato's sick. He's not there. But all of Socrates' other students who rely on him are there. Their finest teacher is about to die. And Socrates says something incredible. Do you guys know, it's a really cool thing, what the root of the word barbarian is? He says barbarian is what the Greeks called anyone who are not Greek, because they thought they sounded like ba-ba, ba-ba, ba-ba. So that's how we have the word barbarian. So that was the Greek view of their civilization compared to kind of everybody else. The rest out there is barbarian, we are Greece. And they had some reason for pride, but it was quite an extreme view expressed in that word. Socrates, near death, says to the people surrounding him, he says, search throughout this country, but also among the barbarians, for such a teacher who can help you. It is Socrates' view that a great teacher is so valuable, is so remarkable, that it should be sought for everywhere, and it breaks down every barrier of ethnicity, of background. The greatness of a teacher shines beyond all those things. Can you imagine what a radical statement that is? Don't just look in Greece, look throughout the world. At a time where that world was called, in their own language, barbarians. And it's the phrase that Plato uses, so he's quite intent on breaking that barrier. I similarly think that one of the startling facts of education is the remarkable transformative effect of a teacher, and similarly and strikingly, and perhaps most importantly, a succession of them. Effective teaching that adds on other effective teaching is the only route out of poverty. It is the only way that education can effectively make a contribution to the development of kids and change their outcomes. I know that's a very strong statement. I'm trying to say that without a succession of effective teaching, not one, but many, in a row, kids can't make up the gaps that society, income, race, and other forces place upon them. There's a terrifying report by someone named Coleman, written in 1969, perhaps the most important research done to date, which terrifyingly said that schools do not matter. In other words, he analyzed all the data in what was seen as an undeniably powerful research report, and he found that schools do not change the social chances of children. Public schools in particular. That's devastating because the very dream of the public school, the very dream of the public schoolhouse, is that it's an environment where our democracy responds to inequity and shifts it. So in '69 we learned that that was false. However, there's been research since then that has discovered that effective teachers break this rule. And in particular, that a succession of them is sufficient to overcome the inequalities in our society. A succession of effective teachers, in my judgment, is not just about those individuals. It is about the culture in which they work. It's in the courses that they teach. In my judgment, the great contribution of AP, the singular and beautiful thing it does, is enables and allows a succession of great teaching to happen. It builds on each other. It builds a level of excellence where practitioners can bring their craft to a new level. It allows them to collaborate in new ways. And it attracts wonderful practitioners into an environment where they can work together. Again, I celebrate this AP community in its commitment to not only individual effective teaching, but effective teaching through collaboration, through daring to share ideas in courses in a way that your work adds up for kids and makes a meaningful advance. So thank you for that, and I applaud that. Let me tell you a little bit about my own background and a little bit about why I've come to the view that working with teachers closely is a solution towards education in these difficult times. I'm going to begin with a fairy tale. In the imagined universe I'm about to tell you about, Democrats and Republicans work together to solve a problem facing this country. There actually is a case of this. As some of you may know, much of my work over the past few years has been working to develop a common set of academic standards called the Common Core in literacy and mathematics. Governors from around this country, Republican and Democratic alike, united behind the idea that they should put aside their state differences and share standards in common. I ask you, now that 45 to 46 states have adopted those standards, what similar act of bipartisanship has happened over the past 5 to 10 years? Let's say 5. I'm really leaving this open to anybody. In what other domain in our society have you seen such a consensus? To me, that suggests that something's happened worthy of note. That it's worth noting that this country is not in a gridlock. That it is capable of moving. We see it in the AP results I shared with you. We see a country that can achieve things when it acts in concert, right? All the AP teachers throughout the country, through their shared endeavor, collaborated to create a historic result. Similarly, Democratic and Republican governors alike faced evidence that moved them to take a shared decision. Let's recount that evidence briefly. What is the considerations that led these governors to work for the Common Core? They were joined, of course, by chief state school officers. So the common standards were developed by a combination of the governors and chief state school officers acting in concert to develop these standards. And there were at least 2 considerations that brought them together. The first is the overwhelming evidence that despite getting a high school degree, many of our students, sometimes as many as 50%, are not ready for the demands of career in college. That is, those students go to a college and they're put into remediation courses because they can't handle a first-year credit-bearing course. Remediation is a trap from which many poor and minority students never escape. The dream dies there far too often. The promise of these standards is to insist that they indeed build a staircase for college and career readiness, so if students meet them, they are ready for first-year college and career-ready work without remediation. You might argue that the best promise of truly college-ready students is they do college-level work within the high school. And that, again, is, in my judgment, the great promise of advanced placement work. But the governor saw these remediation rates and saw a crisis. It showed that our standards, as they were built, were demonstrably failing us. Remember, I'm not talking about the kids who are dropping out. I'm talking about the kids who get diplomas and who are not ready. Second, they recognized that we are competing on not just between states, but globally. That was obvious and palpable to them, and it was wonderful here in my first few minutes that I got to meet an extraordinary team from China that's going to do amazing work in China. And so I actually have not liked, frankly, talking about international competition, because I feel it has the foolish idea that if one country does well, we do more poorly. I say instead that we're in an international community where there is an increasingly urgent need for all members of that community to flourish by bringing them to higher levels of education. But that international shock and constraint shows that if your country is not among those educating its students, your country shall not fare well. So for patriotic and global reasons, we need to build systems that get many more people to the height of their potential. But it wasn't actually the governors or the chief state school officers, in my judgment, that created the politics that allowed this to happen. It is, was, and remains teachers. The extraordinary fact of the common standards. I was just yesterday with Dennis Van Rokel, who's the president of the National Education Association, and with Randy Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers. Those two unions of teachers, in addition to their disciplinary groups and other groups around them, other groups of teachers, have strongly stated their support for more rigorous standards. They have done so in the face of obvious accountability pressure. They have done so at the same time that they are fully aware that their members are being held to evaluative techniques they often disagree with. But they find urgent cause that our students do the work they need to be ready for the demands of college and career. That is startling in a political environment where we think only self-interest can drive decision-making. In South Carolina, when the standards were under threat from a governor who disagreed with them, teachers spontaneously rose up in that state and demanded that they had the capacity and core standards to work in common with their colleagues from across the country. It is teachers who will hold the common standards, politically, socially, and in their classrooms. And let me tell you the final critical reason the teachers led to this, which is an interesting thing. The standards movement had a promise, which is that we'd have a body of academic standards and that teachers and students would know what to do, and then we'd measure them fairly on assessment and students would go forward. It is not a stupid set of ideas. But what happened along the way is that academic standards in virtually every state, and I know many of you have not had the pleasure that I have in examining them, became like phone books. They were endless, vast, and vague. I don't know how many of the teachers in this room have read state standards documents from beginning to end. It is a rare honor to have done so. When standards become vast and vague, there are immense consequences to the entire system of education. That is, the only area of mathematics performance in which we confidently lead the world is in the size of our textbooks. Think, too, about the consequences to assessment. So when you're trying to test far too many topics of mathematics, what happens to a math test is it becomes a Russian roulette, a race to cover wide territory with a great deal of anxiety as to what will be covered on the test, forcing teachers to bet on exposing their kids. It's the worst education word I've ever heard. Let's expose our kids to that idea. When has anyone learned to do something well? Through mere exposure. The truth of mathematics, interestingly, is the opposite. High-performing countries in math are most distinctive in that they focus on far fewer topics done well, radically fewer. The American system is, in comparison, a mile wide and an inch deep. These core standards, for the first time, based on evidence, dare to focus mathematics in the United States on the math that matters most. And there's recent research by Bill Schmidt that shows that these Common Core standards now adopted for the first time are over 90% aligned with the practices of the highest performing countries in math. But why is this about teachers? There was data that we saw that it would take 30 years to teach the California standards. Who bears the brunt of that? Like, let's just talk frankly. Like, what's the difference between teachers and standards authors? Teachers care about time. See, for standards authors, I want to be relatively clear with you. It is faster to add a standard than to take one away. Have any of you ever been in a committee? Just raise your hand if you've ever served on or been in a committee. The only way for a committee meeting to end is to include everyone's stuff. Right? Like, sure, I'll give you that, you give me mine, now we can get a drink. That's what happened to academic standards, right? Committees, good people would meet, they all had their stuff, and it was added, and then we got the result. What we demanded in this standards process, using the voice of teachers, was that we took the time it takes to teach as well as the time it takes to practice seriously. That is, that these standards were in that deep sense doable, respectful of time, and based on evidence. And it was that design idea that is the reason that even the finest states in this country with the best standards adopted these. These common standards were not based on what was merely common among states, which would have been terrifying, but built on the best work states were doing and focused on the work that matters most. I could talk a lot longer, do not fear I shall not, about the Common Core. But I want to try to communicate to you the transformative power of working closely with teachers, of respecting teacher voice, of daring to observe the reality of what it's like when these standards are handed out, rather than what you hope they mean. And then to act accordingly, to provide more elegant and thoughtful solutions. Again, I think the College Board has a great history of that collaboration. I hope we'll build on it. So in that frame of mind, I mean to ask you what kinds of things the College Board would do that would be most visionary to incorporate the work of teachers, to build on it. And I'm going to give you 3 examples of things I've been thinking about. I want to be very clear. The College Board is a we, not an I. This is a membership institution. There are trustees who are here. There are leaders of our team who are here. When I throw out these ideas, I truly do not mean that I have decided or we have decided to pursue them. I mean to do that delicate task called brainstorming or developing ideas. But I do so because I really do remain open, and any idea such as this that really takes hold will have to have evidence behind it, will have to be workable from a financial, you understand, we have to get real to really do something. So please don't be concerned as I play around with some ideas that I'm dedicating the College Board to them or that is a direction. That direction is taken in concert with yourselves. It's one of the wonderful things about the College Board. By building a consensus behind its actions, it doesn't act in a weak-willed way. So, what are some of those ideas I've been wondering about? Some of you may know that there's a very interesting thing going on in the AP teacher community, which is that due to demographics, many of our talented AP teachers will retire over the next 5 years. In my personal judgment, this is a major talent issue. And I see it as a major talent issue, but also a major talent opportunity. That is, I think there's a huge difference between a person who is retired and a person who is retiring. What I mean by that is it is my experience of the world that people at certain periods of their life can actually be more energetic, more alert, more active than many younger people are. So, one of the greatest issues we face in AP is that we want more kids doing it, but we want to ensure that those kids get adequate support when they do it. We don't only care that students take AP, we want them to succeed at the rigor that it implies. And we agree, I've used AP a lot because I'm at an AP conference, but that would be equally true when we're working in students on rigorous work in any grades, in middle school or in other areas. We equally feel it about the SAT or any assessment we give. That is, that if the College Board stands for one idea, it's, in my judgment, that the principled pursuit of rigor is transformative for kids' performance. That the regular practice of good, difficult work makes you better at things. And that part of education is the design of enabling students to practice difficult things that make them stronger. But as all of you know, if you're going to practice difficult things, if you're not going to compromise on the rigor side, which we shall not, then we have to be very artful about the supports that are in place to allow many more students to practice that rigor. Well, I wonder whether there's a match here between the talent that is emerging from retiring and the special and somewhat individualized or group supports that some of these students may need, especially with the aid of technology. Can we imagine a world in which this army, if I dare call it such, though we overuse military metaphors, but coalition or group, society of teachers, each help 1 to 5 students achieve these results? These are gifted teachers with lots of experience. Imagine the effect they could have on a small group of children in their care, or students. Probably shouldn't call them children at that age. Just a thought, just wondering, is this viable? Is this doable? I don't know. But my sense is we can't let this talent stand by the side. Second, some of the data I found most arresting in examining the College Board data, as you can probably sense, think evidence and data are powerful and beautiful things. When we look for overwhelming data, we find a foundation for action. That's how the Common Core operated, and that's how I hope we will continue to operate. And so a source of data that resonates throughout the data, and it resonates throughout our AP data, it resonates throughout the SAT data, and then it resonates throughout the admissions and other data we have. It's very interesting how much the College Board seems. We are a coalition of guidance counselors, of AP, of colleges. We are a remarkable institution at the border of K-12 and higher education, and that allows us, if we are careful, to see a great deal of things. And so let me tell you something we see. While it is true, as I've just said, that there are students, and many diverse students, and sometimes low-income students, who need additional supports, and we talk about that a lot in our society, but I want to cast a light, not as bright as this light, which is nearly interrogation bright, but I want to cast a light on another body of students who are diverse, but have the demonstrated skills and capacity to engage more rigorous work than we allow them or enable them to do. What I mean is students who are prepared for far more rigor than they have access to. Isn't that interesting? Let me describe this data because it's 3 groups of students. And in my view, I say view because this is not, again, a declaration of the College Board's view, although there's already work, very good work, that Herb and others have led, beginning to work on this matter. So I am building on some existing work, but again, we'll determine whether this is something we take on, but we're very interested in it. And as the following data, there are systematically kids for whom we do not deliver the rigor that they are prepared for. Let me describe it to you. In AP, we see a pattern. If you take 10 Asian students, 10 white students, and 10 African American students, and they all take PSAT, and they can get a score on that exam that demonstrates AP potential. In other words, you can predict that someone will do well in AP with 70% likelihood if they score at a certain level on PSAT. Not perfect, but it gives you a sense, right? It's a rough statement of potential. Of those students who demonstrate that potential, 6 Asian students will take AP, 4 white students, and 2 African American students. Seems to me like we're leaving something on the table, doesn't it, to you? What would it be for the College Board to confront those results through its network? What would it be for teachers to consider their role, not just kind of getting through students' AP, but acting collectively to catapult students into the rigor of which they're capable? Let me go on. We see, and I'm going to ask for correction here, but I think the rough data we see is approximately 30 or 35,000 students, but I want to be careful with this data because I don't know it as well, that do well on SAT and don't go to college altogether. Now, I think it's fine if you don't go. You know, there are many people who have a principled reason for not going to college, and that's cool. But if it's because you're poor, or because of racial dynamics we don't understand, or other forces in our society that need to be confronted, then it's a real problem. What would it be for the College Board to organize its resources and capabilities to change that result? Who are those kids? We know those children. We, in a sense, know who they are. What would it be to use our strength and guidance in every force we have? And the teachers, again, to see their work as not complete when the kid, because as you know, parents disconnect as kids get older in school. It's a tragic fact of education. They're all over schools in elementary school, and they're nowhere in the high school. It is startling. But interestingly, it remains teachers who they most trust. This data is overwhelming. The only people that parents really, they do not trust governors. They do not trust school officials. They trust teachers. If we're going to move families and parents to act differently in helping their kids make different decisions, teachers are going to be at the center of such an effort. It's the only way. I want to be very clear. That might be more work for teachers than I'm describing. This might be a mingling, a strengthening of the guidance role that teachers play. I think such work should be remunerated. I think we should celebrate it. I'm not just trying to add duties here. I'm trying to conceptualize roles teachers can play that the College Board and others could support them in doing excellently. I recognize that many reformers seem to act as if teachers were doing nothing today and just want to add more stuff. I promise you that one thing we did in the Common Core standards constantly was cut away stuff so that teachers could do their more important work. So I say this with great regard to how busy people already are and wanting to use all imagination and resource to make it doable and helpful to do so. There is a third class of students, shocking in its size, who could attend a more rigorous university setting, but who undermatch in their college choice. They choose less rigorous institutions to a striking degree, and the results are very bad for them. They often take far longer to complete, and their life chances after are demonstrably weaker. This is particularly striking in the Latino community. This is research, by the way, if you're interested, from Crossing the, I think it's by Bill Bowen, chapter 6 or 7 of his recent book, it lays out this data with some care. So we have kids at every level. By the way, it's particularly striking in the Latino community. And what are those forces going on that are perhaps something like keep close to home? What issues are here at stake? I am very fearful that we shall find that this is disproportionately true of girls, of young women. In my view, it is a challenge to the feminist in all of us that all students have the right to attend the most rigorous university their preparation fits them for, period. Again, it's okay if people make other choices, but they should be made freely, with full information and understanding, and with an understanding of the data, that those choices, when they're taken to a large set, are very damaging for the success of a community. So that's a second level. Do you see that those three levels where we see that kids with skills are not propelled into adequate opportunity, and we see that teachers might play a role? The third and final, and I'm then going to pass it on to you, I want to talk about the ongoing work that kids do in classrooms. One thing I think we fear, and one thing you've been talking to us about, is things like SAT especially, but even AP in some regards. There's a lot of emphasis on a final exam, on a final assessment that's the kind of do or die moment. But all of you know as teachers that the more important work is the work done daily or weekly, the gradual work that achieves rigor over time. It's in the practice of rigor, not at one moment, but gradually, of course, that it shines. How can we work with teachers to give you better tools to handle that ongoing work? And one of the toughest areas, just to be plain about this, is assigning writing. When a good teacher, a middle school history teacher, assigns a paper, do you know how many they get back? 130 to 150. Like, it's like consigning their whole romantic life to disaster for the next couple of weeks. In my judgment, we cannot ask teachers to constantly make this sacrifice because it just can't work. So I think a necessary breakthrough in our world is that we want to have better technology tools that do not replace teacher scoring. I want to be clear, and I want to walk through this very carefully, but build on the best work of teachers to share higher quality scoring tools. Let me get a little specific with you. This is the area that's often now called automated scoring, but I want to put a new twist on it for you. I want to describe it as teacher-led tools to help scoring ongoing work. And let me describe what I mean. In the Common Core standards, what is, in my view, magical and powerful them is that they reward and focus on kids not writing without sources, but to sources. So no longer, today in high school, the most popular forms of writing are a narrative about one's personal opinion or of one's experience. The only problem with that is those two forms of writing don't get you that far once you're in college or in a career. You have to be able to argue with evidence and convey information clearly. But in a lot of K-12 testing, I'm just telling you, the essays kids are asked to write are constantly, what do you think about this, without any evidence that you're supporting your beliefs with, what is your experience, write a compelling narrative, etc., etc. The new Common Core assessments will shift that. Kids will be given sources, they'll perform research on exams while still cultivating their ability to write narrative and expository writing of that sort. The problem with artificial intelligence of any quality is that it all depends actually on the quality of human judgment it's based upon. So how do you make high-quality scoring tools? Based on the quality of the scorers who they mimic. In other words, if you want great scoring, you need great examples of human scoring that it models. Does that make sense? That's how the technology works. So K-12 has a dearth. In schooling in this country, we have a dearth of great examples of scoring this work because all the tests have been unaligned. Except, beautifully, for what exams? In what exam system is writing to evidence and sources the coin of the realm? AP. What would it be to take the top 20% of our readers? An extraordinary group. It's an honor in AP to be a reader. Already an extraordinary group. Imagine if we could find the best of them. Imagine if it was their work on which the technology were based. Imagine if we developed a tool that was not about replacing teacher judgment, but built on the best of teacher judgment. And that then, working with teachers, helped them handle the load of what otherwise is a daunting task. This is the kind of thinking I've been doing about the way teacher intelligence and resourcefulness can make for tools that then help teachers do their work. And with that, I'm going to conclude because I'm so interested in your ideas rather than my own. Thank you so much for your attention. I'll wait for questions. Magan, is there anything I have to take back quickly before it comes cemented in people's mind? Are we okay? What? Okay. You're on your own, says Magan. Please. Any thoughts? Any questions? Yes, sir.
So I've got a question about the Common Core standards, and not necessarily where they are today, but where you see they might be in 10 years. And there are some of us who are noticing what's happening in D.C. right now as the possibility of defederalization around American education. And so if that happens, how do we maintain the coherence and the connectivity of Common Core standards so that they don't run the risk of being sort of ripped apart by state partisan politics?
Yeah.
And then I'd like you to address how you see the College Board playing a role as a very powerful nonprofit in making sure that that doesn't happen.
Your voice is a remarkably clear one. I'm often going to repeat questions, but I think he was so clear, everyone could hear him. Is that correct? People got that. And I assume you mean by defederalization a kind of fragmentation, where control. So I'll answer you in a couple of ways. The first really good piece of good news in managing the risks you described, which is of partisan fighting and a kind of return to state differences, is that this was a state-led process from the beginning. So the work on the common standards began far before the Obama administration, actually. It was a set of state-led organizations that have been working for 10 or 15 years on this topic. It's very interesting. It has its roots in state coalitions for years. And 48 states signed on to the process. Some people believe, and I just want to confront this clearly, that it was only the federal government's support for those standards that led to their widespread adoption. This might be a tempting view, except for two problems with the view. One of them is named Mitch Daniels. Now, Mitch Daniels, as some as you know, is a somewhat important figure in the Republican Party, the recent governor of Indiana. He refused federal race to the top funds. He refused to participate in federal programs. However, as one of the states who was considered to have among the finest standards in the country, he adopted the Common Core standards. Things that make you go, Jeb Bush, who is no small figure in the Republican Party these days, widely and staunchly defends the Common Core standards as the only possibility for innovative breakthroughs with technology that can allow for a platform for the first time that innovation can be shared. You should hear Jeb Bush, he pounds the table on this subject. The other thing I'll tell you is, remember South Carolina, the support and organic support of teachers in that community were a major force in defending this. So I want to be clear that we who have developed the common standards are constantly working to cross party lines, to confuse the things that bind us. And right now, we are in remarkably strong condition. We're remarkably strong condition despite a contentious presidential election in which, interestingly, this is not being disputed. Things that, right? Romney has said that his differences with Obama are on choice in higher education, to the deliberate exclusion of the Common Core. Fascinating. The shocking fact is that there may be room for common sense in American life. We, as the College Board, do not mandate but can cultivate the power of that shared work. We have a wonderful network of teachers, of state leaders who work with us closely, and we shall be vigilant to help them achieve the benefits of shared work. In my view, one way to avoid something falling apart is that it must deliver value. In other words, when teachers find those standards more useful, it's hard to take them back. So we as the College Board should be helping and encouraging the development of really useful tools around common standards. You may say, how should the College Board have the power and expertise to do that? But as you note, guess what AP is? It's a powerful set of common standards, and we support teachers in doing that work today. So I think the College Board must follow state leadership, must listen to teacher voice, not be a separate entity that imposes its will, but has a remarkable role to play by building on this consensus and strengthening it with tools. I think we're going to be okay. Yeah.
I've read some of your comments on the future of the SAT and from the alignment board to the Common Core. Would you elaborate on that?
Yes. The question was, would I elaborate on some of my public comments on the possibility of further aligning the SAT to the demands of the Common Core? I want to say again with a clear voice that I do not speak here for all the trustees and decision makers and for the colleges and universities and other institutions that would need to deeply agree with any suggested changes. So please do not, again, mistake my passion for intention that I feel these decisions can be in any way unilateral. But I want to sketch out for you, because I think candor is so important, some visible ways that the current SAT both obviously aligns with the Common Core and its finest attributes, and also faces challenges. So, how does it align? The College Board was one of the founding bodies of the Common Standards. There was a College Board team, as many of you may know, who drafted, together with other institutions, the College and Career Ready Standards. And they then contributed additionally to the development of the K-12 standards. So, with good reason, all the evidence that informs SAT, the most powerful things about it, let's remember, whatever one dislikes or likes about the exam, its cornerstone is it does predict, together with grades, with some accuracy, your success in a first-year course. Without grades, no. I just want to be very clear that we always consider this part of a broader picture, period. But combined with that, it's more powerful than those grades alone. So it does have, so you've got to look at the evidence. In other words, why? Why is it? Right? You want to know that because you want to be very careful to cultivate those things that help kids succeed in first-year courses. It is things like the quality and range of text on the SAT is very strong. It is over 80% demanding nonfiction text. I would take a look at it with a cup of coffee. I really think it's fun. I've taken 10 of them, I'm very curious about these things. And they are things like whether an economic analysis of the Constitution is justified or not. You know, in other words, were the founders, did they care about rights or economic? It's Aristotle on plants and animals, I kid you not. An account of his thinking on that. It is demanding, surprisingly demanding nonfiction text. And the questions are much, I think, less narrow or purposeless than people know. They're a lot about what is the argument here? What is the evidence that supports it? What is the claim? How does that unfold? I think it's hard to argue. What would best summarize this? Now you might think that's trivial, but imagine a world where citizens cannot summarize complex texts on their own. They then require others to summarize them for them. That's a disaster. So I want to say that SAT, and I say this seriously, cultivates literacies that matter just not for college, but for citizenship, for command of evidence that's a really important part of being productive in our society. In mathematics, what's most interesting about the SAT is its celebration of surprise and problems that you don't expect. That is, what's frustrating to people about SAT mathematics is not that it is higher in the sense that there's a lot of calculus or advanced math on the exam, but rather the situations you see are unusual, deliberately. It asks you, for example, to do things where if you don't change what's given to you and just plod through the problem, it's very difficult. But if you swap around what's given to you, the problem breaks. I ask you, would you prefer to hire someone who can change what's given to them to solve a problem, or would you prefer someone who always plods through the problem? Do you see what I mean? It's a powerful thing. What we have to be very careful of, in my judgment, is that instruction follows suit. That is, if we're going to demand kids read a wide range of dense nonfiction text, we better enable that in the high school and middle school. Text can't be incidental to history and science. They have to be at the center of it, right? That's what the core standards demand. So there's a lot that SAT, if we want kids to encounter surprise in mathematics and handle it, what about in our classrooms? You know, in our classrooms, it's almost like, if you didn't teach me that or didn't warn me about that, it's not fair that you tested it, right? Testing recapitulates just what's taught. That is very poor training for syncopation and surprise. What if we made that a deliberate part of instruction? Do you see what I'm trying to say? Because we want to put things on these exams that deserve practice. In my judgment, and I mean this, it is irresponsible to put something on the SAT that we do not want students to practice 100 times. It is our ethical obligation that they shall do so, and that practice should be productive. That is, it should be worth doing, because they're gonna. So what about it might not be worth doing? What do I question? I question that we write on the SAT today without source material. That is, you're given an essay on the SAT. It looks like an argument, because it asks for your opinion on an issue of the day. Let's call it waste disposal or some topic, okay? But you're not given any sources. What that means in terms of scoring, as many of you may know, is you're not scored on how accurate or true anything you say is. Now please think into the mind of an adolescent. If I'm under time constraints, and if truth does not matter, what is the most effective mechanism? It is fluent production of fact, sometimes called lying. We have to be very careful to take responsibility for what we ask for. I equally challenge, and again, forgive the controversy, that colleges and universities that demand 2 or more personal essays from students, when they then do not demand them as what success is in first. So how many first-year courses are there where a personal essay gets you through? What percentage? Interesting, right? But we tell kids throughout high school that the one essay that's really going to matter is your personal statement. What about analytic essays to get into college that demonstrate command of evidence and analysis? I'm not saying we might not also have a personal essay, but we at least have to equally privilege the analytic act that prepares you for the demands of college and career. So everyone must take deeper responsibility, if I'm making sense, for what we ask for. It seems to me that the vocabulary at the heart of SAT should not be what many would consider obscure, but should be the academic vocabulary which is the true source of power in this world. Words like analysis and synthesis and hypothesize. Words that express logical connections that are evident in all complex text you read. A vocabulary that really is a language of power, particularly for English language learners and other students. What I mean to say is, if the vocabulary on the SAT is rock at the center of what kids really need, I do not mourn that they study it. If they are writing to analyze sources, I do not mourn that they practice it. That is the principle, I think. I think that has to be a principle of PSAT, of AccuPlacer, of everything we do, that we take responsibility for the practice that assessment implies. I could say forget test preparation, but I think as real teachers, you know what really happens. So I don't think it's honest to say, just look at standards, forget the test. I think we have to design assessment which are worthy of your work and worthy of your practice. But those decisions are not my own, to clarify.
I'm a real fan of the ExxonMobil AP advertisements, and I'm wondering if the College Board has considered helping districts educate parents with poverty on campaigns such as those advertisements.
I thought those advertisements rocked, so that is not an official position of the College Board, but I agree with you completely. I also think that Peter Kaufman, who's I think here, is doing some very interesting work leading the effort. I think that picture is arresting of the empty desks in the Capitol. That's why I left it on the screen. I think some of this Don't Forget Ed work is extremely good. I will tell you that I think we should publicize the breakthrough in AP scores that's been achieved in this country, because it's time to tell some good news in what the work of teachers can accomplish. I think it's equally urgent that we talk about what's possible as well as what is needed. I think all these things. I think that we need to bring a generation of corporations into this dialogue, like ExxonMobil, to make a productive impact on our society. ExxonMobil stepped beyond the pet project of the local after-school thing or what is classic business involvement in education to take a systemic approach. General Electric, GE, has done a similar thing by investing in the Common Core. I think these are transformative opportunities. So I see it not just as something the College Board can do, but use our convening power to unify, to unite the investments that these organizations can make in the quality of education, the quality of teachers. I'll tell you something very interesting. I was with the head of the foundation for GE over the last week, and they will make no grant, this is the business community, that does not expressly engage the collaboration with teachers and their unions, period. Interesting. The Helmsley Foundation has begun with a similar statement. So we've got to redefine these categories we have, like business and educators over here. The possibilities of collaboration, in my view, are very exciting. How are we on time? About 5 more minutes, or 15? Terrific. Great. Hi.
I understand your passion about the non-fictional text.
Yeah.
I'm wondering where literature.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks. You know what's so hard in life? You talk about one thing, and for some reason it tends to knock the other. You know what I mean? It's like this awful, and it's a rhetoric. I wish I said it when I first said it, so I wouldn't have to wait for your question. So I want to step back and talk, if I may, about the role of literature in the common standards. Would that be okay if I really kind of step back and breathe? Because I want to be clear with you about something. The role of literature, the role of the arts, I want to talk about things like that, which can seem in narrow terms inessential for the progress towards college and career, and talk about their fundamental role. So I want to kind of breathe with you and talk about it. In the common standards, in kindergarten through 5th grade, it is true that they require what is surprisingly a remarkable shift, so we have to tell the truth. In elementary schools today, overwhelmingly what kids read, overwhelmingly, 80 to 90% sometimes, are stories. That's all they do. And the literacy block has expanded in those schools. When I say only stories, what I mean by that, when I talk about content-rich nonfiction, that does not include reading and writing about the arts. It does not include reading and writing about history or science. So what happened in the elementary school is by expanding the literacy block and only doing stories, we excluded history, science, and the arts from the elementary school. These Common Core standards require that there's now a 50-50 balance between literary and literature study in kindergarten and 5th grade and history, science, and the arts. This is in no way the death of literature in the elementary school. It's an equal balance. And it's based in large part on the beautiful standards of Massachusetts in literature in early grades, as well as other state standards that articulate the growth of your knowledge of story and narrative, which is an incredibly powerful set of knowledge and understandings. But we must not, of course, nor did anyone intend to, in defense of literature, suffocate history, science, and the arts study in the elementary school. They have an equal role to play because of the wide vocabulary that nonfiction text in early grade gives you in building content knowledge and in closing achievement gaps. So I think everyone agrees with this, but it's important to know what happened, which is that the only estimation of stories in the elementary school led unintentionally to this effect. So the Common Core standards require a balance. In 6th through 12th grade, let me announce clearly, the English language arts teacher with these common standards is required and remains mainly the teacher of literature, that is of drama, poetry, and narrative fiction. And I think the standards for that study are beautiful. They are, as someone who is very involved in writing them, they are based on commanding evidence and paying attention to what you read and understanding an author and caring about their choices. C.S. Lewis says, in the face of a great work of art, surrender. And these standards dare to encourage students to read literary text of a far higher quality and more demanding quality than they have typically been privileged to. The greatest threat to the great study of literature in our environments is students are often given pretty mediocre stuff. I'm just telling you, it's not good enough, and that impoverishes further their understanding of the power of literature. Let me tell you some controversial things, just to say them. We've talked to the textbook publishers, and they hire special Latino authors, get this, to write the materials for anthologies and textbooks. They want representation, but what they don't want is authentic Latino writers because they talk about things like sex in their communities, or the reality of their worlds. So what have we done? Right? We've demanded representation, at the same time indulging in a kind of censorship that says even our older children cannot encounter the true complexity of the worlds of Native Americans or Latinos or South American literature. And I hope I'm not offending someone, but in Gabriel Garcia Marquez, it's hard to find a story without sex. I'm just saying. I tried personally to put the first magnificent, does everyone know the beginning of 100 Years of Solitude? That when he discovers ice, it's like the most amazing first paragraph ever. I tried to put that example in the College and Critical Standards, and they were like, have you read the rest of the book? And I was like, yeah, I did. So these common standards, for the first time, really demand a breakthrough. And I think AP, really, I just must salute Trevor's bravery and leadership of this program. It's really been AP that has, within the K-12 system, not bowed in the area of science, in the area of literature, to demand high-quality text, to demand good things are read with kids, to give teachers the safety and support in doing good work. And for that, I really applaud you, Trevor, in keeping that program safe. And I think teachers and together we must unite to talk about the quality of things that kids are reading and literary text. I really mean that. But I think the standards are there. They're your help in that, in strengthening the teaching of literature. What they do ask of the English language arts teacher is actually only one change. They ask the English language arts teacher to include more literary nonfiction. Again, not 50%, some. In other words, it's left undefined in the standards. It asks, what is literary nonfiction? It's nonfiction written for a broad audience. It's not the technical documents of a science classroom or primary source documents in history of a certain sort or a narrow sort or reference texts. It is, however, things like, these are, of course, in some of them primary documents, the foundational documents of this country and the great conversation that occurs from them. Because why? Why is it so important that English teachers treat those documents? Because they are some of the most magnificent fusions of thought and language this society has produced. They are not only expressions of historical significance, they are expressions of rhetorical significance. This standards, just like it restores elementary school teachers' right to be the guide to the world, restores, in my view, English language arts teachers to be talking about fiction and also thought together, sometimes separately. Of course there's thought in fiction, please do not misunderstand me. I've read James, I know characters think, I know at the heart of fiction is thinking, I know that poems think and develop ideas. Please don't get me wrong. But imagine to have the straitjacket that never in your curriculum can you explore a wonderful piece of literary criticism in relation to what you're reading, that's not part of the curriculum, that we don't draw on the founding documents and other acts of rhetoric, that a New Yorker piece that moves you might not be something that you read to encourage in students an active and set of wide range. What literary person does not read widely? That's what these standards say about literature. They talk about its dignity and essential role and complement it. They make much more demand for change in the history and science classroom, where they demand that texts are not only part of the work, but central. What I mean by that is it's no longer okay to say that I'm teaching kids history, but not to be a historian. That is, if a kid cannot read and write about history, they can't be a history teacher. I had a wonderful experience with Jonathan, is his name Coe from the board, that his last name? The person who led the revision of Jonathan Chu. He was the board member of the College Board that led the revision of the history AP course. I just want to again cite, so I'm clear, that I talk a lot about K-12, it's my natural place, but obviously the greatness of the College Board is that college and university people are involved in the redesign of these wonderful courses, right? So isn't it cool that this great history professor is working closely with K-12 teachers to make these courses? So I want to emphasize that in my work and in our work, that collaboration shall deepen, just to say it. But in particular, what Jonathan said, is he said the single most important sign of a real historian, at his level, is document-based analysis. Without it, you're nowhere. Similarly in science, some people say, I teach science hands-on. I don't do text. That's a very interesting statement. Think about how much of biology you can learn from solely the experiments you do with your own hand. Practicing scientists spend upwards of 50% of their time reading and writing. That means that text can't just be referred to in those classrooms, but is central in them. So when the common standards, when you talk about that 70% nonfiction, just to clarify for one time and one time alone, we're not telling the ELA environment is dominantly nonfiction. What we're saying is that science, history, social studies, technical teachers have to take on their rightful role in contributing to students' literacy. And as a matter of politics, may I ask you if anyone knows what group in the society, governors, who was it? Was it the research group? Was it the states? Who insisted that in these standards, they were standards not just for the ELA environment, but for literacy across the disciplines? What group demanded it? That demanded that teachers would be held accountable, not just in the English language arts classroom? The American Federation of Teachers. Things that make you go, I hope that was clear, and I'm sorry I didn't make it clear earlier. Yeah.
Good morning. I'm going to project my voice. There is a wide body of research to suggest that we can predict at a very early age students that will go on to college or will drop out of high school as early as 4th grade, 3rd grade, 2nd grade. And often when students get behind in those early grades, they can't catch up. So my question is, to what extent has the College Board talked about supporting elementary school or even early childhood education?
Let me be clear again that this is a really interesting question. Let me just say it out loud with the mic just so everyone can hear it. My colleague first said that she notes that in much research there's a view that if you don't make progress in early grades, it's very unlikely you catch up later. So if the College Board is truly devoted to college and career readiness on a much larger scale, I think, is it okay to paraphrase you, is the College Board considered acting at those earlier phases of education? Because most of our work clearly is now focused in around middle school and the high school. Is that a fair description? Yeah. So again, let me say that would be a rather strategic set of things to consider, involving the board, involving the team, So let me just walk a couple of steps into the problem. It's one thing we'll look at carefully, I can promise you that. But let's talk about it for a minute. I think it is already a deduction from the College Board's mission, which is college and career readiness for all students and kind of the notion that rigor repeatedly practiced can help all kids, that there needs to be, in a sense, college and career ready work done, college and career ready rigor in every grade. That's very different from saying we're training pre-K kids for a career. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm talking about a level of rigor and depth, the vocabulary depth you need in those early years to be ready then for later. I'm not talking about applied technique. You get me, right? I'm talking about college and career ready rigor and richness in those early courses. The biggest problem with this country is if you walk around to 4th grade classrooms across a school building, across states, it's terrifying. The variety of rigor would appall you. Actually, it's only AP that really has effectively, in my judgment, scaled, I don't think it's perfect, by the way, but it's scaled a sense of rigor in a very unusual way in education. So to me, we ought to play a leading role in fostering consistent richness and rigor in earlier grades. That may not mean, though, that we deliver it, that we design it, but we ought to help those who are. We ought to figure out methods of sharing principles of course design and scale. We ought to figure out efficient ways, because all I can tell you is our mission depends on it. If we are within our lifetimes going to transform results, it is essential for our mission that kids are doing college and career ready work every year. We all know that if we're going to massively change results. So I can tell you, it may not be part of our practice yet, but it's part of our mission today. And it's part of our success today. So whether we do it through partnership, through imaginative work, and the great news is the Common Core Standards makes my word more than a hope. The Common Core Standards are at their finest definitions of precisely what that level of rigor looks like in reading, writing, listening, and speaking, and in mathematics. By the way, it is true that in K2, the K2 math standards are beautiful. They are a masterclass on only the addition and subtraction of whole numbers and the quantities they measure. Period. We do 80% more math in K2 in this country today. But if you're really good at the addition and subtraction of whole numbers by the beginning of 3rd grade, by the way, when I say that, please don't see it in a limited way. I mean fluent at the procedures, applying them to rich and diverse problem types, understanding what you're doing when you're doing it, you are on your way. You're okay. You're not held back. You see what I'm saying? So focus is an important part of this. We can't pile on with them, right? We have to follow the focus in the core standards and then think about how we can deliver rigor in earlier grades. Again, the College Board's relationship to this may be partnership, it may be using our voice, it may be design, who knows? But I think we would all agree it is part of our mission and part of our success that it occurs. That much is clear.
Partnership, part of the challenge that we're going to face in the K-12 system is how that's going to be assessed.
Smarter balanced is the other.
And I think there's a fear out there that how that assessment will be used will play a role in that process of how that's designed.
Let me say a little bit about that. And yeah, sure. The gentleman described, let me try to give a little background here so that everyone has a common set of information. The common standards have been adopted by 45 states, 46 states in English language arts, including English language arts and literacy. And then those states have divided into two consortia that are designing for the first time in this country common assessments to measure those standards, where the ambition is to both design assessment, but also to improve it, to make for much, since the assessment is shared, to deliver far higher quality assessments in the K-12 environment. And the gentleman was asking, there's some anxiety, like, will they get it right? Will it work? What will happen? I am a founding partner of an organization now called Student Achievement Partners, which is born of many people who played a leading role in developing the common standards ourselves. We're utterly independent. We take no funding from the developers of assessment of any kind. And our sole interest is in the Common Core standards, achieving their potential to improve assessment and curriculum, etc. That's my current life before I begin the College Board on October 15th. It is a major objective of that working team, which is really talented, to support the consortia in doing great work. So those of us working on the standards are totally alert to the fact that they live and die based on assessment. I will now, just for kicks, say something slightly more controversial. Another institution that you may have heard of, called ACT, has recently announced that they will develop, in competition with the consortia, a set of 3rd through 10th grade tests. I think at the College Board, and it depends on the board's shared wisdom, as well as our own, as well as my team's wisdom, that we should chart a different path. I think the College Board should lend all aid within its power to help the consortia succeed. I think we should support state-led work to develop a next generation of tests, and in no way, directly or indirectly, undermine that work by going to states and saying it will fail and offering our products in return. That is, I think the College Board is a nonprofit organization. Dedicated not first and foremost to protecting where we stand, but to enabling the college and credit work at every grade that you talked about. And that means high quality assessment in those grades. And we should be helping states do that work. But again, that is my personal perspective and not yet policy. Though I tend to know from my great colleague Herb Elish that that is very likely aligned with the College Board's policy. I just want to pause then because we're coming to our conclusion. The one thing we didn't get to talk about, even though it was kind of my first question to you, was what are the really cool things we could do to strengthen the hands of teachers every day in their classroom and work better with teachers and educators in this country? That's okay. But I just want to return to it and leave it with you. I'm really interested in your thoughts. I think the most powerful thing, maybe, about AP, in addition to its design, in addition to everything great about it, the most powerful thing about our work is we're in touch with great teachers throughout this country. We have a remarkable network. Many of you are here. I think it's really one of the most, if you want to say it, powerful instruments of social change in our agenda. The widespread integrated movement of teachers is, in my judgment, the only force powerful enough to move things. So I just want to say to you again, this board and this institution has increasingly, under Gaston's leadership, been devoted to a clear notion that our role is to not just measure what kids are capable of, but to strengthen their hand. It is not just to identify excellence, but promulgate the rigorous conditions that enable it and the supports required. That is our task, and teachers shall be our most important ally. Thank you again for your attention.